And so the founders that take on this journey, I think, really are due a lot of respect and assistance from people around the world, because it takes more time, it takes more effort, but ultimately they're impacting human beings, not just getting you, the newest widget from point A to point B. Um, so I think what I like to tell founders is healthcare is a very difficult road, but I'm committed, my team's committed, so many people around the world are committed to helping them succeed, because ultimately we're all going to need the services of what they're providing throughout our lifetime.
Jamie Sundsbak runs Mayo Clinic Platform Accelerate, a platform that helps AI and digital health startups improve their products using clinical data, technical expertise, and feedback from the people who may eventually buy them. In this conversation, we discuss what Mayo looks for in founding teams, why some health tech startups gain traction while others stall, what healthcare systems are actually spending money on right now, and how founders can improve their odds of building something that survives the long road from prototype to patient care. I'm Walter Thompson. This is Fund, Build, Scale. Fund, Build, Scale is for anyone who's interested in learning the basic skills required to launch a startup, secure initial funding, and transform their idea into a sustainable business. Get the newsletter on Beehive or LinkedIn, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please leave a rating or review. Jamie, thanks very much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to chat today about everything going on.
So, for listeners who don't know, what exactly is Accelerate and what kind of startups is it designed for?
Yeah, so Mayo Clinic Platform Accelerate is a 30-week accelerator for AI health tech startups. We're really focused on the earlier stage of AI startups. So you can think of people probably a little past what we would call idea stage, but very much focused on building their first product, or if they've built their first product, maybe it's, kind of a crude MVP, and they're really looking at kind of taking it to the next level by utilizing our rich de-identified data sets in our cloud, but also the expertise of Mayo Clinic clinicians and other experts.
So, how crude is crude? I mean, are the pre-customers, pre-revenue, like sketches, like photos of sketches on a whiteboard? What do you want to see?
Yeah, that's a photos, sketches, the whiteboard, napkin sketches. Those are the things that probably are a little too early for us. I think, what we like to see is uh, something that we can at least have a first look at and it makes sense. So it at least makes sense to us at an early stage. But I think the most important part there is that the companies are a pretty solid company. So, even in an early stage, we want to see that they have, a really good data scientist, a really good technical founder who can build that product. And of course, equally as important on the business side. So we're really looking at the team, as most accelerators do very early on. But at the same time, we it depends on where the companies come from as well. So a lot of times in the US, we kind of judge companies based on funding stage. Are you pre-seed, Series A, or whatnot? But as an international accelerator, we find that judging people like that is a little harder because of the wealth of non-dilutive funding all over the world.
Mhm.
And we see a lot of companies not necessarily having to take funding maybe as early as they do in the US. So I never like to use the word "it depends," but it does depend a little bit upon geography. But we like to see people with, at least a decent MVP that gets us really excited about what they could potentially do in our program.
What kind of TAM are you thinking about? Are you looking for people who are going to come in and, kick over the market and own everything, or really just fit into what you think is like a sensible e healthcare ecosystem?
Yeah, in terms of TAM, it's important, obviously. It's probably less important for us in the accelerator, of course, more important for the business. Um, But the interesting thing in healthcare is, there can be kind of the bigger things where we talk about, pharma, drug discovery, things like that, which the TAMs are, incredibly huge. Then I think something that plays to Mayo Clinic's strengths is, we have a really great group that focuses, say, on rare disease, and so the TAM on that is never huge, but for us here at Mayo Clinic, it's really more about impact to patients. So sometimes those kind of smaller TAM businesses are overlooked by investors, they're overlooked by healthcare systems. But we have to kind of remove that thinking a little bit in our world and think about the fact that if there's a solution that can help 10,000 patients, that's very important to us because each one of those is a life, right? And the primary value of Mayo is the needs of the patient come first. So TAM's important, obviously, as a business, but not 100% a focus of our accelerator. It's more of, how many patients can you help, and fully realizing that there's a lot of applications out there for cancer prediction. There's a lot of applications out there in the cardiac space. There's rare diseases where we don't see a lot of those solutions presenting themselves at this point. And if we can find them and enable them to impact patients, that's just as valuable to us.
How long is the program itself?
So the program itself is 30 weeks. So
Okay.
it's a very compressed period of time. It's not like a traditional business accelerator, like a Techstars or a Y Combinator. We were very intentional in our design because they're already fantastic. It would have been very lazy for us just to outright copy what they do and slap, the Mayo Clinic logo on it and say, look, we have an accelerator too. I think we wanted to be a lot more intentional in our design and really set ourselves apart from other accelerators, not in a competitive way or anything like that, but just say that, hey, let's leave the traditional business accelerator to the Techstars, the Y Combinators, the G Betas, the wealth of great accelerators around the world that really focus more on the business model, really empower founders from an early stage with rolling out a business model canvas, telling them to get out of the building to talk to 100 customers. That's all super valuable in the life cycle of a company.
Mhm.
But for us, we wanted to look at the assets that we could bring to bear, which is this wealth of de-identified data that's housed in our cloud, our cloud environment, which allows rapid development of AI and digital health solutions, expertise at Mayo Clinic. And when we kind of put all that on paper and looked at it, we said, we really aren't a business accelerator. What we are is a product accelerator, to your point, and really focusing in on the product and the technical team and just trying to remove as many barriers as possible for those teams to jump in and within 30 weeks take something again from maybe a crude MVP all the way to a product that seems very viable and that not necessarily could be launched because obviously we have here in the healthcare system regulatory burdens and things that we have to be careful about, but at least they can feel that they have a solid product that's had quality feedback from Mayo Clinic and utilized a really rich data set, which is going to allow them to see the full picture of a patient versus just maybe snippets that they've had access to before as they've been training their models.
When you're, I guess, reviewing applications to the cohort, what does the due diligence process look like? Who performs that, I guess, and how long does it usually take?
So diligence, I don't know. I'm not familiar with every accelerator's process. I think we, of course, in looking at our own, there's kind of two components. One is the business side, obviously, and then there's the technical side. The business side, we're just kind of reviewing, sort of your basic financial documents that they will submit. We want to make sure, that everything's we really look at, say the articles of incorporation and other documents just to make sure that everything looks good. I think in, over 100 reviews of those documents, I don't think we've ever found anything too crazy out there for even from international companies, but we have for the due diligence there. Um, obviously cap table is important. So we do look at that stuff. But really, for us, again, as I've said before, it's more on the technical side. So it's really taking them through a process where we can connect them with our data team. They can have a good conversation between the technical team from the startup, but also the data team from Mayo Clinic platform. We can have a really good conversation about what types of data they're looking for and provide them, with high level numbers and types of data that we would have available to them. And the cool thing about what we do is we always turn it back to the founders to make a call whether to move forward or not. So, if we have that initial call, it looks like, hey, the data is there, it's of sufficient quantity. Um, we'll turn it back to the founders and say, hey, it's your equity or future equity that you're giving up. You have to make the call and let us know if if you want to proceed. If they do, the next step is really an old school proposal. I like to say a lot of us came from the research world initially. We're used to writing grants, and so we really like it when we can scope out exactly what the company wants to do within the time period. 30 weeks again seems long, but it's very, very short once you're in the program and going fast. We want to make sure that that proposal is really clear, that it's sketched out by not only the startup team, but also our technical team, so that we are all level set so that on day one, we feel prepared to work together to help these companies succeed so that by the end of 30 weeks, they've accomplished what they want to accomplish and they can move on after graduation to do bigger and better things.
Is the program hybrid remote? How does it work usually?
So the program is fully remote. We were kind of birthed at the end of COVID. So we saw the value of not only, of course, the big draw for most of the companies to come into our program is access to our cloud with our de-identified data. Obviously, that cloud can be accessed from virtually anywhere. So that got us thinking, why have people move to one of our three sites in the US? It makes more sense if we can just get them to access the data where they are. And then we can use, the miracle of what we're doing right now, right? Having a great conversation over Zoom and to do check-ins, to do mentorship, and everything there. And I think that's been a real surprise for us as something that we were probably thinking more as a reaction to COVID turned into something very valuable for founders because we've heard stories of accelerators that will invest money into companies, but they'll have them relocate for 3 months or more to different cities, which is great, and I totally get it from an economic development standpoint.
Kind of disruptive.
But they end up really spending a lot of that investment, flying their teams back on the weekends to see their families, food, housing, transit, all of that. So we wanted to make sure that, we think people can be creative no matter where they are. And obviously now we have the technology to make that happen through our programs. So I think that's been a real benefit for us.
You're connecting founders with clinicians who could be their customers at the end of the road at some point, ideally. Are there feedback loops built into the whole program? What's the process for refining this product that comes in and making it better when it's out the door at the end?
Yeah, I would say that when they initially come in, obviously we have their proposal. We understand what they've built or what they want to build. And then I think we give them a period of time where they can access the cloud environment, start building their cohorts in it with our data sets. And I think, at that point, they have a program success manager and a technical success manager. And the difference between those is the program success manager you can think of more is a representative of kind of the business side of what we do in our accelerator. And then a technical success manager is more on the technical side. They're the real experts in the data. They've built AI models, many times within the walls of Mayo Clinic. So they're very familiar and they really serve as a guide. So the first thing we can really help them with is just navigating through the tremendous amount of data that's there in order to build these cohorts so that they can start training their models. once we do that, and that does take, several weeks for them to go through, then, they can start to show us what they're able to do. So we do weekly check-ins to give feedback from our team, to give them high-level insights on, hey, this is great, but have we considered, bringing this other table right in that you could take a peek at, and maybe that would make your model better. Um, and then once we feel that they've got a lot of traction, that this is looking solid, that's when we try to introduce our mentor. We don't want to go too early, because what we find is if we introduce our mentors too early, if we don't give them enough time to kind of really focus in on what they want to build, they get what I call shiny object syndrome, where they see more data than they've ever had access to. Their mentor starts to spark new ideas, and they go wildly off track.
Mm.
So we want them to kind of stick to their original proposal, and so we work through that with them. When we start to fold in the mentor, once things are a little more solid, that's where they're getting, like you said, they're getting kind of a good feedback from someone who could potentially be their customer. And the cool thing about Mayo Clinic is their customer is also happens to be a doctor at, one of the best hospitals in the world. So they see, an amazing variety of patients from around the world that come to Mayo Clinic for care, so they can add even more insight to the companies. So I think that that's very helpful to our companies. Um, they start to get, again, those high level feedback and insights. They go back, they iterate within the program and utilizing the data. They'll probably retrain their models again, and then come back to their mentor to get more feedback. So it's sort of that feedback loop, that iterative process, kind of
Hmm.
back and forth. And then ultimately, what we typically see is when they do their kind of final internal presentation, um, their mentor is usually there and present. And um, what we always hope for is that by starting this relationship, it leads to a further relationship with that mentor. And in many cases, that happens where they continue to stay engaged through different processes that we have here at Mayo Clinic outside of the accelerator, and continue to even potentially co-develop or do a joint publication. We've seen, and obviously the ultimate prize would be implementation at Mayo Clinic, and several of our companies are still going through that motion right now. So it's really exciting for us and really exciting for the companies.
Can you describe like a typical mentor? Like what's the persona?
You know, the cool thing about Mayo Clinic, and there's a lot of cool things about Mayo Clinic, but the docs are so approachable and friendly and willing to give insights. I've worked at other medical institutions where typically we see the opposite, right? We see clinicians who are super busy, and rightly so. Their job is to focus on patients, but they see it more as a chore to meet with companies, for instance. But here at Mayo, they always seem to want to take time. I think they understand, obviously, the clinician understands the pain points that they're experiencing, probably more than in many cases some of the startup companies do. So they really want to see these solutions come to fruition. They want to see them get to market, um, because they know at the other end of that is a patient who's waiting for that solution to become real. So I would say, maybe it's just the typical male clinician, but very approachable, very willing to give their time, even if it's early in the morning or late in the evening, to help these companies succeed. Um, and I think they've just been overall. Every mentor we've asked has kind of expressed that it's a really an extension of Mayo's culture, and I think they've done a fantastic job. So. Um, Yeah, I would say that's kind of the sort of giving, the kind of give first mentality, I think is really present here at Mayo, because they know at the other end of any innovation is a patient who needs that solution.
When founders are in the accelerator, they're trying to refine the product offering. And so it's not really a go-to-market kind of thing, as you said earlier. But I am curious, after the 30 weeks is over, can they actually dip back into your ecosystem to do customer discovery or refine their messaging and positioning?
So we do. work on that obviously within the Accelerate program itself. But to your point, what's next? And obviously, um, that kind of goes to our demo day. Well, that's what you do normally call it in an accelerator program. We call it a showcase. Um, but what we want to do is towards the end of the Accelerate program, we kind of take a temperature of where they're at, and we start to ask them the very important question of what's next for you. We want the
Mm.
founders to say, hey, we've spent 28, 29 weeks in this wonderful accelerator, but of course they need to take those next steps. So we look to our founders to really help us identify what are the next steps for them and then build that into their presentation for their showcase. And again, in the spirit of we're kind of a different type of accelerator, you know, uh, our home base for Mayo Clinic is Rochester, Minnesota. Firmly in the middle of the country. We aren't in the Bay Area. We aren't in Boston. Our demo days can't be full of thousands of investors who live in that community like they can in the Bay Area. So we've decided to kind of pivot a little bit and say, again, what is our unfair advantage? Our unfair advantage is connection to health systems. So not only Mayo Clinic and our 3 sites here in the US, but we work with about 64 other health systems globally that really work with Mayo Clinic hand in hand to improve care in their institutions as well. And they're very hungry for a lot of these solutions, especially in the digital health and AI space. And so by getting the founder up on stage and being able to articulate those asks very clearly and say, my next step is a pilot. My next step is I want to talk to clinicians from rural healthcare systems, for example. Uh, Hopefully they find that match and then they can continue on with all our partners or Mayo Clinic itself. But it really comes down to uh, the founder to be able to make that ask, and then hopefully we kind of create provider FOMO, if you will, to be able to help them take their next steps. In addition to that, we also get the question of uh, we want to spend more time building more products or continuing our journey with Mayo Clinic platform. So we've actually are launching within the next couple of weeks here an extension of our Accelerate program, which will allow multi-year access to our cloud and to different advisors inside and outside of Mayo, as well as some of our newly built deployment capabilities, which will allow these startups to continue their journey to build products with us and hopefully, again, speeding time to market and ultimately impacting the lives of patients around the world.
And is this program accessible to all cohort, like everyone past and present, or is it kind of just like a selective process for?
So it will be available. The initial kind of iteration of this for the next few months will be available to current or previous graduates of the Accelerate program. After that, we're going to open it up because we know that sometimes, maybe we're missing companies that are kind of mid-journey, right? They're right in the middle of their growth. They probably aren't going to benefit from a classic kind of accelerator or even a product accelerator. So we're going to try to get them in to kind of meet them with where they are to be able to continue that journey in our multi-year program.
Yeah, circling back, how do you spark that provider FOMO you just talked about?
It's difficult sometimes. But I think just by virtue of those providers attending those showcases really signals that they're interested in innovation. They're interested in seeing what's happening. So they kind of self-select in a way, much like, putting investors in a room would self-select. Um, but there's hacks that we've used in the past, which is, doing it in person is great. I think, it's very hard to reach a global population of 64 different providers around the world by doing it in person. Um, so what we try to do is ensure that these companies do have some opportunities to spend time either in person or virtually with some of the providers. So that's something we're working on as we pivot more towards a virtual session, is thinking of some creative ways to keep the people on the call, to be having conversations with the companies. And I think it's just giving them an opportunity to have a good, honest conversation, and to create a mechanism to help them raise their hands, right? If four different health systems that are rural in the previous example, when they said, hey, I want to talk to some rural clinicians, making sure that we find ways for them, if they're not able to connect initially, to make sure we follow up and make that connection for them.
At the top of the show, we talked about kind of your ideal founder team, maybe a dream team framework as far as a technical founder, a clinician, maybe a data scientist. I mean, how many of the founders you come into contact with don't have any clinical expertise or experience?
You know, it's funny you say that, because I had sort of my own preconceived notions when we started this, that of course, if you're in healthcare, you would have a clinician as part of your founding team. It just was an assumption that I had, and it's quite amazing how many times, I would say probably we've had well over 1,000 applications now to the program. I would say, 20% of them or more do not have a clinician as part of their founding team. They might have a advisor who's a clinician,
Hmm.
which is good in some cases, but it really kind of shocked me that there wasn't this deep tie to a clinician on day one. Um, so again, going back to what the dream team is, I think what I like to see is founders with a previous track record, which any investor will probably tell you is a good signal. It doesn't have to be that way, but I guess if you're asking me for the dream team, it's a founder that has uh, built a company. It doesn't necessarily have to have been a tremendous success or anything like that, but I like a founder who isn't brand new, who has some battle scars.
Hmm.
Um, and then obviously the technical co-founder, as you said, that's key. We need to make sure that they know what they're doing, that they're very good at what they do, they can demonstrate that, and then having a data scientist along for the ride who's has experience with EHR data, I think is a real winning combination for us. And then having a clinician as part of the team. I think, I've been very fortunate to talk to companies, and they weren't unfortunately couldn't get them into our accelerator, like a Bridge, who has the kind of winning combo in one person, right? Who has Shiv, who's a fantastic CEO and with business experience, but also a fantastic clinician. So you see kind of variants of that where people can play dual roles. But that's really kind of the dream team for us, is it's just a strong person on the business side, a strong person on the technical side, and then having someone who has that clinical knowledge, and then a really, really good data scientist who understands this amazing amount of data they're about to see and how they can best take advantage of it and position themselves for success.
What's your acceptance rate?
Our acceptance rate right now is about 8%. So it's I think fairly competitive. I did some customer focused interviews with accelerators before we started Accelerate, and I was always told that if you stayed at about 10%, that's pretty normal for accelerators. So we've tried to honor that and keep it fairly low. But I think it's also, if you round up, it's 1 out of 10 companies gets accepted. So
Hmm.
I think the chances aren't too bad, but we definitely want to make sure that we're only accepting what we think are uh, high quality companies that have the potential to, essentially change the world of healthcare. So that's kind of how we look at it.
Are there specific sectors, or I guess maybe a better way of asking is like kind of problems you're trying to solve? That I mean, I like everyone else in the world, your customers want actual solutions, not just like cool models. And so I guess let me ask you, like, what's really gaining traction right now in November 2025?
Yeah, so just to kind of answer the first part of the question, I think we're pretty agnostic when it comes to solutions that we can support. Really, it comes down to the limitation of, do we have data sets that make sense? And because our data is mostly derived from our electronic health record, there's a wealth of data there that can play into a lot of different solutions that are out there. Um, we also look at, is there a need inside of Mayo? That's kind of a bonus point, right? If we find a company that really addresses a need inside of Mayo, that's interesting to us, but we don't limit ourselves with that because we know that a solution for Mayo Clinic, a top hospital around the world, may not be the same solution that, say, a rural healthcare system would need to adopt. So we keep that fairly open. Um, the second part of your question, I now forgotten,
What's
but it
what's
was a
re-
good
what's
question.
really gaining traction these days?
What's really getting traction? Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we're seeing, a couple of things that are gaining traction is obviously how you sell your product into the market. So for the vast majority of our companies, they're having to go and sell health system by health system, which is very slow, but it's kind of the way, at least at this point, that's available to a lot of these solutions. So um, we really, I think, when we see a kind of standout with a different business model of how they're going to sell their solutions, I think that really causes us to kind of stand up and take notice. So a great example of that is Open Evidence. We found them very early, a couple of years ago. And really, one of the reasons we took them is I was anticipating the same answer that I always get from everybody. It's like, how are you going to market? Well, we're going to have to sell health system to health system.
Mhm.
And Daniel Nadler, the CEO, kind of just turned around and said, we're going to sell like Google. We're going to make it free. We're going to open it to every clinician, and we're just going to start scaling. And that just took me by surprise and really got me excited about the potential that they could have. And they've done, very well. And they're now used by over 40% of all clinicians in the United States daily. So that really speaks to, the power of a different business model than the same old thing.
Mhm.
Um, so that's been great. And then adoption of other solutions. For me, I think, if you put yourself in the place of a lot of health systems, I think I can say this, and I'm not a health system executive. Um, a lot of health systems are more worried about the business of healthcare right now. How do they continue to make money in very, very challenging times? So a lot of the solutions we see, at least at an early stage, that are being adopted, are really, I would say, solutions that focus more on the business of healthcare, whether that's helping them with things like prior auth, or helping them, do a internal function that makes their lives easier because they can 10x what they're doing in the business of healthcare. I think we see a lot of interest in that, but I would say starting to kind of catch on are more of the kind of preemptive or predictive algorithms that are being created around specific disease states as well. But we're definitely seeing the business of healthcare kind of being priority one, which it makes sense. You've got to, as a friend of mine always tells me, you got to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help others. And I
Mhm.
think that's what a lot of health systems are doing right now. They're righting the ship, and then hopefully, with all of the other great solutions that are out there, that they then will have the capital to be able to invest in those solutions in the future.
I'm going to put one out there. My wish, my coin in the wishing well is going to be a tool that helps doctors' offices make best use of the downtime so they can work in more standby patients.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
love
that
that. Like something like I want to get a text message from my dentist as I'm walking down the street, 200 yards away, saying, "Oh, someone dropped off the calendar today. You want to come in for a cleaning?" I would love that.
yeah, we should work on that.
I'll
Hell,
only ask for 20% of the patent. That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, we could spin that up by next week. No, those are great examples of, I think things that address the business of healthcare, that, I think are fantastic ideas. And I've definitely talked to a lot of founders who have those ideas. And fortunately, or unfortunately for us, a lot of times they don't need deep EHR data.
Hmm.
But the cool thing about platform is once they've built their solutions, they can go to another program that we have called Solution Studio, which helps them, basically qualify their solution with Mayo Clinic, and then be able to deploy those solutions into different health systems to make it easier for them. So we've got an answer for those companies as well who can't make use of, say, our traditional accelerator, which again, we're just trying to, make what we do easier and better, for all providers. And that's the cool message of what we're trying to do here at Platforms. We're trying to be a true platform. It's not just finding the best innovations for Mayo, it's literally finding the best innovations for any health system around the world, to be able to adopt, use, and get in the hands of clinicians and ultimately impact patients faster.
For anybody who's listening, who's thinking about applying or building, what's the one piece of, like, I guess, eyes wide open advice you want them to hear today?
The one piece of advice I think I would say, come into it, definitely apply to our accelerator. Let's start with that. But I think you've got to realize how much work this can be, and not just our accelerator, but just the business of healthcare is very complex. And as a founder, hopefully you realize that. If you don't, you will very soon as you start to learn. But at the same time, I think, in my opinion, there is no more worthwhile endeavor than healthcare, right? I've seen brilliant technical and business people who have gone through our accelerator who could be building any product in the consumer space, or anything else that isn't as heavily regulated as the healthcare system. And so the founders that take on this journey, I think, really are due a lot of respect and assistance from people around the world, because it takes more time, it takes more effort, but ultimately they're impacting human beings, not just getting you, the newest widget from point A to point B. So I think what I like to tell founders is healthcare is a very difficult road, but I'm committed, my team's committed, so many people around the world are committed to helping them succeed, because ultimately we're all going to need the services of what they're providing throughout our lifetime.
Thanks so much for the time today. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Awesome. It's been a real pleasure to be here.
The Fund, Build, Scale theme was written by Michael Tritter and performed by Michael and Carlos Chairez. Michael also composed Ocean, the track you heard at the top. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and leave a rating. It helps more people find the show. You can get the Fund, Build, Scale newsletter on Beehive, follow along on Instagram, and if you have a guest suggestion or a question, reach me at fundbuildscale@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Fund, Build, Scale is a production of Truth and Soul Media, LLC.